Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. For those of you who have not registered for our customer conference, we are having it in Indianapolis, Indiana, and there is some information up on the screen there for you to take a look at and register with that QR code. And I'll also put the link in the chat as well for you to go ahead and register. But it's 2 days of great sessions. So the drop down times are there. And like I said, we have 2 days of educational sessions from our Innovia team members and our ISV partners. So take advantage of it. Like I said, it's Indianapolis, Indiana, April 22 and 23. And presenting today is Galen Norman. He is one of our application consultants here at Innovia. And as a reminder, we encourage you to ask questions during our presentation. So please feel free to type them in the questions box and we will get them answered. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Galen as he's going to cover API versus 2.0.
Right. Good afternoon. As Angie said, my name's Galen Norman. I'm an application consultant on Team Ignite at Ignovia Consulting. We work primarily on Business Central projects, but I work on occasional Power Platform projects, primarily Power Automate, but I have experience in Power Automate and in Power Apps. So today we're going to talk about what is API version 2.0, what does it do, and how does it work? We're going to get into demonstrating that API in the Power Platform using Power Apps and Power Automate as examples. And then we're going to talk about overcoming some of the limitations that the base API has. So with that, let's jump right in. So the information I'm going to give you right now comes straight from Microsoft, and I'll speak to it kind of throughout the project. But basically, what is the API version 2.0? It's an updated version of API 1.0, which was released in spring of 2019 with Business Central 14, which was the first version of Business Central that allowed for cloud connectivity. It allows seamless integration between Business Central and other services and third-party solutions. And you got to be honest, I'm not a developer. Like I said, I'm a consultant. So I won't pretend I know exactly what the API does, how exactly it exchanges that information. But what's important to take from this is that it allows Business Central SaaS to connect to other online services. So use cases. The API 2.0 integrates seamlessly with a variety of programs. It can integrate with Dynamics 365 Sales, formerly D365 CRM, and other CRM platforms. It integrates with e-commerce platforms like Shopify and Magneto. It can also connect with HR and payroll systems, and it can be used to connect to custom applications. We use it regularly to connect with clients existing like MES and other systems. And probably the reason why most of you here today is that also helps us integrate with the Microsoft Power Platform. So how does it work? I have to be honest, I'm not a developer, so I'm still learning the whole like API concept. I know that an API is an intermediary between online programs, so I like to think of this API as a cloud connector. It connects multiple programs through the cloud. With regards to Business Central specifically, what I can say is that it creates links to Business Central tables, even tables that aren't directly accessible via BC pages. And that concept will make a whole lot more sense using the Power Platform as our example today. Today's discussion will center around the connection between Business Central and Power Apps and Power Automate. This is where the bulk of my experience with the Power Platform is. And in my opinion, it's the easiest to conceptualize visually. So let's get into the meat of our presentation, API version 2.0 and the Power Platform. So we'll start with Power Apps because in my opinion, it's easier to get the full picture of the available data with Power Apps. Built into Power Apps is a data source called Dataverse. What is Dataverse? Dataverse is a cloud-based data platform that allows you to securely store and manage data used by business applications. It organizes data into tables, which can be standard or custom, and integrates seamlessly with the Microsoft Power Platform, Dynamics 365, and other services. Why does this matter? When Power Apps access Business Central, it does so via Dataverse tables. These BC Dataverse tables are what's called virtual tables. Virtual tables are custom tables that display data from an external data source without storing it in Dataverse. So it's kind of like in Business Central when you have a flow field on a page. That data isn't being stored on that page. It's being stored somewhere else. That flow field allows you to see it though. So I kind of like to think of a virtual table as like a flow table. And that's my own term. That's not a Microsoft term. So um, just in case you go looking for it later. So at this point, we're going to jump into the virtual tables and Power Apps demo. All right. So when you log into make.powerapps.com, this is what you see. What we're going to look at first is the tables. Real easy. Right here on the left-hand side here, you go to tables. These are Dataverse tables. A majority of the tables in here are system tables. They come straight out of the box from Microsoft. Um, you cannot out of the box connect to Business Central this way. You have to download an app from AppSource. So I'll show you that. When you get into AppSource, you're going to look for this Business Central virtual table. Download it. It's free. You may need admin permissions to do it. But if you have that, no problem. Download it. It'll go to your Power Apps. It will not go to Business Central. It'll go to Power Apps. Um, so um, you'll go to Power Apps then. The next step for setting that up, you're going to look at all of your tables. Unfortunately, I don't know why, just you're going to have to click on all every single time you come in here. We're going to filter this by virtual. And the first step you're going to look at here is you're going to look at this Business Central virtual data configuration. This is the easiest step of the whole process. In here, you're going to enter your environment information. The base information you're going to need here, Business Central will already be populated. You'll have to populate your target host, which is your API that comes directly from your environment. You grab that, copy and paste that into here. Um, you insert your environment. This will be a drop down after you populate the target host. And once you have the environment in there, you populate the default company. There are other fields here, but most of them are system fields that we'll never touch. It's just how it is. The one thing I would tell you to pay attention to, though, is this API managed prefix. This will make sense when we start looking at some of those other tables. So this is how you're setting up just to be able to connect to Business Central at all. All right. So when we come back here, like I said before, we have to click all again. And then we're not doing that. We're going to filter by virtual tables again. And then we're going to come in here and we're going to go to available Business Central table. Remember I said that API prefix is important? This right here. This is what's telling us that we can see this table through that API configuration. Right? So in here, you're going to see a list of all the tables that you're able to see using that API version 2.0. Right? So you already see quite a few right here. I'm going to grab all of them though. There's 84 out of the box, which is quite a few. But as you'll see later, you may be missing a few that you may need later on. But from here, what you can do is you can make these tables visible. Currently, unless this toggle right here, visible, is set to true, you're not going to be able to see this table. So if I went looking for contacts, I'm not going to see the Business Central contacts table. I'm just going to see that base Dataverse table. right? So it's important to recognize that. I just full disclosure, I've had issues with connecting additional tables here. That's a personal tenant issue that we're working through, not anything related to Microsoft at a higher level. It's just an internal thing that we're working on. But I do have this one table enabled here, and that's what we're going to use as our example. All right, so we're going to go look for that customer table. I'm going to go back to the full list of tables. All we're going to go to virtual tables and we're going to look at it. So we see customer. How do we know this is what we want and not just some random other customer table? First off, it's a virtual table. All those standard B or standard Dataverse tables are generally, I think it's the standard version. So we see that it's a virtual table, but also we see that prefix that die in 365 BC. We're going to see that's what we want. So I'm going to click into this table. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on Dataverse itself. There's other webinars out there for that, but what we see here is the base table. This is the what you would see out of the box. Um, I might have modified some of these columns, but I didn't necessarily modify them. I just hit them, unhit them. Um, how we can do that here, we have the same thing in other Dataverse tables. We can choose which columns we want to see. There are a lot of columns in here, a lot of fields. What this represents is all the fields from the customer table that you're able to see with the API version 2.0. So there's a lot of stuff in here that I promise you will never need to see. For instance, this ID, you probably won't need this in your app. Um, the last modified date, it might be important to you. Chances are it's probably not going to be though. But you have the addresses, you have block, city, state, tax liable, things like that. Those all come from the customer card. There are other fields from the customer card that aren't available, and it's just because they were not included in that base V2.0 API. What is super handy here though is this data is live. If I modify data here, it's going to update in Business Central. So for instance, I'm going to use Spots Myers Furnishing, and I'm going to do test 0226B, right? And it's saving. Once it's saved, I can come in here and I can go to my customers. I'm going to go to Spots Myers Furnishings, and there it is. If I want to change this again, I can go see. It's going to save. Big thing that's really important. You need to leave the record for it to save entirely. So I'm going to refresh this page. And there it is. That data is updated. Um, really, really handy. Um, so why is this important though? So we show the relationship between Power App or the Dataverse table and Business Central. Why is this important to Power Apps though? So in model-driven apps, and I'm not going to go super into the different types of apps and what they are, but there are two apps. There's model-driven apps and there's Canvas apps. Model-driven apps, you can only have one data type, period. It's Dataverse. It's the only data source that you can use for model-driven apps. And unless you have your data in a Dataverse table, you're not going to be able to use it. This allows you to use your Business Central data in a model-driven app. Otherwise, you would not be able to. Additionally, so like the question is, okay, fine, I can use it in a model-driven app. What if I just want to use Business Central? It's like, yeah, that's fine too. You can use that. But if you have an app that has more than one Dataverse source, if you have other sources across your Dataverse, other tables that you want to reference in there, and you don't want to just jump between that data source and Business Central and jump all over the place. You want everything in one place, then you're going to want to do it in a model-driven app, and this allows you to get that data. Um, So what about Canvas apps? Canvas apps can use a variety of cloud-based sources, right? You can use Business Central actually as a Canvas app data source. Um, the problem sometimes, though, using uh, those things as direct data sources is the relationships behind the tables don't always come across. So if we look at this Spots Myers furnishing here, and we look at like the salesperson code, right? This salesperson code is a link to a completely separate table, right? So if you have this other table that it has this relationship with the customer card, that relationship is followed to Business Central or to the Dataverse table. So for instance, and of course, salesperson code is right here. So we see here, it should be a drop down, of course. Well, of course, the one example that doesn't want to work for me. It would work in your app. In a Canvas app, the field would be a drop down. But that relationship follows it, right? And that's not always the case with other data sources. So with that, we're good with Power Apps. Again, Angie said if you have questions, put them in the chat. Um, Angie, if questions come out, just throw them my way. Um, So that is the demo for virtual tables. So we're going to move into Power Automate. So the version 2.0 API for Power Automate, uh, it allows it to interact with Business Central for approvals and other types of flows. The best way to see this interaction is in the actions get record and run action. Also running the Business Central, the business event trigger shows a variety of business actions that are tied to the base API. So we're going to get into that demo now, and we're going to look at our flows. So we're going to look at the first one here. We're going to look at a purchase order approval workflow. Let's wait for it to load. As we see here, it's the old designer. It's just a little bit easier to understand for this. It may not be easier to work with modifying, but it's easier to demo here. So this is a base purchase order approval workflow. It is out of the box. I didn't modify anything. I just changed the name for it. That's it. So what you see in this approval workflow, we have the trigger of when a purchase document approval is requested, and the first action is this get record. What does this get record do? This get record pulls all that information from the purchase document into Power Automate so you're able to use it using dynamic content. Um, so let's look at some of that dynamic content here. So if we see this start and wait for an approval action, this is the message that's actually getting sent to whoever needs to do the approving. And it's all using that dynamic content, meaning that it's changing as whoever is approving or requesting and all the information about the document changes. So an approval was requested by, and it pulls the information from the requester for purchase order number, and it pulls it from that get record totaling, and it pulls it from the get record, so on and so forth. Um, Here's the issue though. So if I wanted to add more information, if I wanted to add information about my vendor here, I should be able to get it from this get record, right? Well, here's the issue. If I add the dynamic content, I don't even see get record as a source that I can use to pull that data in. Now, if I know the expression behind it and I know what the data looks like, I can do it manually. And I have experience with this. I've done this a bunch of times. All I need this information here where it says body, get record, and then whatever the field name is. The problem is this can be problematic if you make a mistake. One mistake can mess up this entire um, piece of data. It's not going to kill the flow, but it's going to make um, that data empty. So if, for instance, if I capitalize the A in amount including VAT, it's not going to show the amount at all. If I miss a punctuation, if I miss the underscore between get and record, it's not going to populate at all. If I use brackets instead of parentheses, so on and so forth, I'm not going to beat that dead horse. But if I make a small mistake, I'm not going to be able to use it. I'm pretty good with my coding and things, but if it's the end of the day and I'm tired and I make a mistake, save it and come back to it the next day, I'm going to not realize what I did. In my opinion, a whole lot easier way to see this is to use the parse JSON action. So I'm going to come back to my flows and I'm going to show you another purchase order approval workflow where I added a couple of steps. So after get record and before get URL, we started with an initialized variable. So I'm going to create a variable based on the information from this get record. We see the body get record, right? From here, we're going to parse the information out of that variable into JSON format. JSON is that language, that Power Platform Microsoft language that you're able to get that data into your Power Automate flow. With that, I just exposed all the data that comes from that get record field, right? So remember, Power Automate flows downhill. We got get record into the initialized variable into the parse JSON. It takes all this data from uphill. What does that look like? Now, in this start and wait for an approval in the message, I go in here and instead of having to put an expression in there, I see this parse JSON and look at all these fields. So many fields that come from the purchase document. A lot of these fields you'll never need. You'll never use. I promise you, you will not be communicating these in your flow. If it's that important to see that level of detail, you can use the URL here to go directly to that purchase order. But let's say you have multiple vendors that have very similar names, but you know they're in different states or something like that. You can use this dynamic content to say, vendor and state, vendor, city, state, so on and so forth. So you can see right off the bat, oh, I know it's vendor A versus vendor B. But in any case, we see that there is a ton of data, a ton of fields, and this all comes from that V2.0 base API. All right, so we have a decent number of, we have 84 tables and we have a ton of fields on each table. Question comes up, can we use those, a custom field? Unfortunately, no. Reason for that is the API is built on these fields. If there is an additional field, you would need a custom API. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So those are the two actions or the one action, I'm sorry, the get record action. That's where we're going to get this information. The next action, pardon me, is the run action. I'm using a journal approval workflow just for an example. There's a couple of different ones you can do, but the run action will show you the actions you can use based on that API. So in here, we have the trigger, the general journal batch request approval. These are all of the actions that we can use as a run action. So we got journal post. In this case, it's a general journal, so we have journal post. We have purchase invoice post. We have sales credit memo post. We have sales invoice cancel. There's a bunch of them in here. Once you've selected one, Power Automate is going to give you a box where you have to set the parameter. In this case, we have the row ID. We're going to pull it directly from the trigger, and that'll tell Power Automate which one to post, which it'll then tell Business Central to post that. So whenever you select one of these action names, it'll then give you a parameter that you have to select. It'll then go push that way. Most of the time, this is going to be dynamic content. Sometimes you can hard code into here, but like I said, most of the time I've done it's been dynamic. So you can see we have quite a few actions in here, but the selection is kind of limited. So that's that action. And I apologize, I'm clearing my throat a little bit. 'Tis the season for um, nasal issues, right? Um, so the third thing I'm going to show is the trigger, that business event trigger. And I'm going to go back to the old designer again, find the Business Central connector, and then it's when a business event occurs. Choose my sandbox, and then there's my events. So we see here there's a bunch of different events um, from Microsoft. We'll come back to this one. But we see that there's so when a purchase order is released, when a sales order is released, when a shipment gets posted, things like that. So these are all triggers that are built into that API. So that is the Power Automate demonstration. With that, we'll move back here. So there are some limitations. We already saw them. The number of tables. There's 84 of them. There's more tables than that in Business Central. And you may want to access more tables than that in Business Central. There's also the number of fields. Um, the fields, while they are pretty detailed, there are some that may be missing. Also, the custom fields aren't involved in that base API. And then the limited number of actions specifically in Power Automate. So, how do we overcome this? I know it's not the answer usually that consultants like to give, but custom development. Um, Microsoft prides itself on the Power Platform being a low code, no code platform that citizen developers can learn and master. Unfortunately, though, there are still instances when a professional developer is needed to expose elements of BC to the Power Platform. So with that, I will go to my example here. So as most Business Central users, administrators know that data in Business Central is stored in tables. Those tables are exposed to the user through pages. So I'm going to use opportunities as an example. Oh, that's my task, not. We're going to go to lists. We're going to look at an opportunity here. So if we open up page inspection, this is what's going to tell us what table's which. So we have the opportunity is up here. All the fields on the opportunity card are going to be shown here. But if you look at the sales cycle, this is something entirely different. This opportunity entry is a completely separate table. Well, I had a client reach out and ask about a Power Automate flow that would notify them when the sales stages get updated. Unfortunately, out of the box, it's not possible because if we look here at the available Business Central tables, and this is just a good reference whenever you're looking for those available tables, go back to Dataverse. You can see exactly what's available out of the box. If we look here, we see opportunity, but we don't see that opportunity entry. So what we had to do, we had a developer get into it. That developer wrote an extension for us that exposed the opportunity entry table. You see here, Novia Consulting. Um, he said it took him like an hour. It was minimal. That time is based primarily on what the fields are in whatever table you're trying to expose. You see, there are not very many fields in this table. It's not going to take very long to write. If you're trying to expose a whole custom table with a whole lot of fields in it, the heaviest lift there is going to be naming all those fields. I'm not a developer, so I won't tell you exactly how long these things take. But that's what the feedback I always get is that's what's going to be the time built into it. What is nice though is that's all developer work. There's not a whole lot of work that we as consultants need to know on the other side. We just need to know what table it is and what fields we want because we don't necessarily need all of the fields if we don't want them. But if we look here with this event, this opportunity entry inserted, all I have to do is select it and go from there. That's the extent of the work on my side. I need to recognize that the table is not available or the field is not available, communicate that with our professional developer and put it into the Power Automate or Power Apps whenever it is available and test it. So coming back, we're going to have a quick recap. So what is API version 2.0? It's an updated version of the original BC API 1.0. What does it do? It allows Business Central to integrate with a variety of other SaaS programs. And how does it work? It exposes Business Central tables and fields. API version 2.0 in the Power Platform allows Power Apps to connect to BC through its native data source and Power Automate to perform a variety of approval and business process flows. And the overall limitations is just understanding. We have to need an understanding of Business Central structure, data structure, and access to a professional developer. And with that, I will open the floor to any other questions that might have come through.
Galen, we have no questions that have come through. Apparently,
Okay,
you have explained it very thoroughly.
fantastic. Well,
Oh,
with that, even if there are questions later, this will end up getting posted. Um, Feel free to reach out through my contact or through if you're already a client, reach out to your CSM. Um, they've reached out to me with questions like this over time, no problem. But yeah, well, that's with that. Thank you for attending.
thank you, everyone, for attending. We do have a couple of recaps to mention or some resources to mention. So we have our resources page that I wanted to make known for you. There you will find a slew of all of our resources, events, um, podcasts, past webinars, blogs, you name it, it's on that page. So utilize that. And like I said at the beginning, if you haven't already, you are more than welcome to register for our customer conference that is being held in Indianapolis, Indiana in April. And you can also get to that on our resources page as well. So thank you all for attending. Thank you, Galen, for the wonderful presentation. And you will get this sent to you in an email to check out the recording. And you can share it with anyone, and it will be posted on our website and on YouTube. So thank you again, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you soon on another Innovia webinar.